Okay, now I'm recording. Now we got video. Okay, good morning, or good afternoon. I'm on the East Coast here. Welcome to our first class live for this course, Industrial and Organizational Psychology. This is our week one class live, what I like to call our Zoom room. So I'm happy to be here with you. I am all alone right now, but hopefully some of the students in the class will be joining me very soon. In any event, I'm going to go ahead and get started, not to waste time. If you did not log in, but you are watching this as a recording, then I'm going to give you a little code to use so that you can type it to me in the message tab, and I will go ahead and you will be able to earn your extra credit points for viewing this class live Zoom room, or if you join me here in the next few minutes. So be looking out and listening for those key words there. All right, as I'm sharing my screen here. Hey, Debbie, just getting started here. How are you? Can you hear me, Debbie? Let's see.
Hello, Dr. Ann.
Hi, Debbie. You want to go ahead and put your video camera on so we can get a look at you?
Oh, no, not today.
All right. Go ahead. I was just getting started. Where in the country are you, Debbie?
I'm in Atlanta.
Oh, terrific.
There is an issue. I'm going to alert you to this. When I clicked on the Zoom thing, in the actual, when the course lineup, it has an area for Zoom with your name and everything. When I click on it, if you follow that link, it asks you for a password.
Right.
I had to go copy the one that you had put in the announcements in order to get in.
Yeah, that's the way it's been for quite a while, Debbie. I had an issue with that probably going back almost a year, almost. And that's why I'm not sure how it ever got resolved or didn't. Let me ask you, Debbie, have you taken other classes at Central Christian College, and have you been able to join the Zoom room in the way that you tried with this class today?
Sure, I do them all that way.
Is that right? Well, for some reason or another, that has not worked for me for several classes now.
Oh, bless your heart. Yeah, it usually works for me. As a matter of fact, I graduate. My last class is the first part of December.
Oh, terrific. Congratulations on that. That's for sure. I might reach out again to Dean Croker or some of the other folks that are always so helpful there. I sat one evening and troubleshot with a gentleman that I'd only talked to that one time, and we tried several different things. And I was, in my mind, I thought that it might have been my other computer, because it's my favorite computer, but it's a Mac, and it's not supported, and it's a little old, and I still love it. So, but now I've got a pretty much brand new Lenovo ThinkPad, and I tried it with this too. So I put in the announcements there early on, just looking the announcements for the link. And this has been working fine. What I'll do, Debbie, is we'll go ahead and I'll run through some of the preliminaries here. When I say preliminaries, I mean things we do in the first week, and talk to you a little bit, and just kind of gets a little conversation going that makes it a lot more interesting, and get your ideas and things like that. And then what I do after that, I go ahead and I put it on a YouTube, and I send that link out. Now, when you out of curiosity, when you're able to go into the other courses, does it record itself and stay there, or do the people have to put it on? The professors have to put it on YouTube or something?
No, there was the last class that I was in. I can't remember what not the last one, but the one before that. I can't remember what it was she had to do, because I asked her was she going to upload it, and she said she thought it was done automatically. She wasn't aware she had to do something.
Right.
But now I will tell you this: the number that's beside in the actual classroom in the course lineup, the meeting ID number is different from the one that's listed in your announcements.
Yeah, because the one in my announcements is something I'm doing on my own. That's why.
Okay, I was going to say, because I did notice that,
yeah.
And they are different, but I usually just click on the link and can go straight into the classroom.
That would be so much easier, I think, for everybody. So I will reach out. Of course, today's Sunday. I'll reach out this week to someone there My wife also teaches at Central Christian College, and she pretty much does it this way as well. But this is right now that we're on Zoom. Anyone can sign up for a Zoom account.
Right.
There's a free account which I'm using, which works pretty well, and then there's a paid account which gets some more bells and whistles, and probably if you're going to use it a lot more than I do, that's how it's a very good and effective business model these days, especially with technology. Or some of the apps, they'll give you something that's pretty good, and with the hopes that you'll really like it and want to do a little bit more with it and pay a subscription. But anyway, this has worked well, so we're going to go ahead, Debbie, and just really informal. I like that. I'm grateful that you're here. I like to talk to my students in the class live. I know it's not easy. Everyone has like that. And that's one of the great things about online education is you don't have to be at a certain place at a certain time. It does make it nice. Now, I don't typically look at my phone when it goes off, but just in case this is a student, now it's anyway.
I totally understand. I'm gonna try to hang as long as I can today.
Well,
I
yeah. Okay. We won't be here too long. Like I said, I check my phone and when I'm on here in case it is a student trying to get on. So two interesting topics this week, and one of the great things about CCC is of the many things is the 6-week course format. Now there are abbreviated courses, but they're not. I take that back. Reel that back in. They're not abbreviated. They're accelerated. So we tackle quite a bit in 6 weeks. We get a semester's worth of work in this, and I think quite a few of the students, most of them, maybe even all, or essentially all, take one course at a time, because you can get 3 courses in just a little bit longer than a typical semester. So that's a pretty good model. But this week we talked about job descriptions, and they are extremely important to write an effective, efficient, and accurate job description. And I think in the book and the video and the PowerPoint, it gets into the pragmatics of why that is. It helps you when you're recruiting people. This is all very true. It helps the person that has the job understand. And sort of what we've alluded to here, and maybe even more than alluded to, is if there is a problem at some point and the employee is not performing to the liking of the employer, we can hold that job description up and say, this is your responsibilities, this is what we hired you for, and you're not doing A, B, and C. And, likewise, we don't often hear that an employee comes back and says, I've got these things to do. And many job descriptions these days have a little bullet in there, if you will, that says other duties as assigned. That can be any number of things, right? If you have a contract through a union or a professional contract, you can somewhat limit that, but not everyone can. There are contracts that allow for that other duties as assigned, which is ambiguous. It doesn't lend itself to, okay, the other duties should take maybe 5% of your time, where the primary duties are naturally going to take 95% of your time, or 90, or even 80. And bosses abuse that in some cases. But the thing that I would like you to take away from this is, when it's done right, and it's done with fidelity, and it's done where everything's above board, it lends itself to helping the organizational culture, which is that thing we're going to learn more about as the weeks go on. It's that thing that you can't really see it and feel it and touch it, but it's there. Those are the traditions and the rights and the myths and the stories of the longtime employees that make up, what kind of an organization, what kind of a company it is. Is it a company that embraces the casual look, or is everyone to be serious? I think this is explained pretty well by examples. the old IBM model. IBM is not nearly the company that they were some years ago, but we used to call IBM Big Blue. Everyone there at a certain level wore like the blue pinstripe suit, white blue pinstripe suit, and the power tie, and that's what you wore every day. There were no casual Fridays or anything like that. And then compare that to say, Google or Apple, either one, where it's casual. Like people come in shorts and jeans and topsiders and open collar shirts and things like that. That's part of the culture. Do people typically work overtime? Do people have flex time? Those kind of things. Debbie, let me ask you, in your experience, whether it's firsthand at companies you've worked for or where your friends have worked, what kind of things come to mind when we talk about organizational culture?
Well, excuse me. Well, it depends on the company. Like when I was working for an ATM company, the way they portrayed the company was, when I got into it, was totally different from when I actually got in there. From the outside looking in, you would have thought it would have been, well, it was a close-knit company, I will say that, but you would have thought that it was a highly structured thing. But when I got into it, that was the most disorganized mess I've ever seen in my life. We made it work, but it was, in some areas you had micromanagement, in some other areas you had no management, and it was like everybody wanted to point the fingers at everybody else for the job not getting done, but there was no cohesiveness between any of the departments, and eventually the company failed. So I mean, it's just, you would think, there was I forget what it was called, but there was Connie. I worked with Connie at that time, and she's the one I wrote my paper on today. She used to follow something. I can't remember the name of the rules. It wasn't Robert's rules. It was something else, but there was some sort of rules that she said, we need to be following this. And she tried to get them to do that, but they wouldn't do it. So that was my experience with that.
Thank you for sharing that, Debbie. It reminds me of so many companies. I mean, I love this. I love organizational psychology, and I love to look at companies and business model, and really how the human interaction impacts the companies. And as I said, this reminds me of many companies who, what I heard from you, really, they say one thing, but they're doing something else. Mm-hmm. And there's a few reasons for this. Sometimes, and there's commonality with all those reasons. They think they want to be that structured, very organized, dress a certain way, or this is the protocol, and this is like you said, the rules, for conducting things, and everything's done within a system, and we have systems in place for all of these things. Sometimes they say it because they think that's what'll work, or they think, but it doesn't really fit the top management style. I've seen this very recently with a particular leader at an organization who, and I did some personality work with this organization and this leader in particular, and she tried to present anyway on her personality inventory that she was a structured, organized, traditional, do it by the book kind of person, because it turns out in her mind, she thought that's what her job position had called for, and she had to do. That's what, but it wasn't really truly who she was. And I'm taking kind of the big organization like you talked about and sort of bringing it back into like one person who was the leader of this particular organization, or the division, if you will. So it was interesting because the organization was having some problems, and she came to the realization that I'm not who I'm portraying, and that's confusing to my the people that report to me, because I say we're going to meet every Tuesday at 9 o'clock, but we don't, or I'm late, or I cancel, or any number of things. So it's very, she comes out, she came out as, okay, this is how it's going to be, and then she didn't follow through on that. So going through that, I was able to get her to see that there are leaders with her personality style. It's just you have to recognize that, and you have to say, look, we're going to fly by the seat of our pants. And I mean, that doesn't always work, and you may have to bring in other people to be that structured person. But any of those can work. Part of it is recognizing and realizing what you're going to be. And you said it was an ATM company. Is that right, Debbie?
That is correct.
So, that lends itself to the banking industry, which you think of that IBM model, where it's the three-piece suits, and it's the bankers, and it's the, everything is done in a system. And, it's funny, you walk in any bank, and my desk is a mess right now. But, you look over, and, the folks that, their desks are typically clean, everything's neat and organized. But again, let's go back to the tech companies I mentioned before. For anyone would have thought back in 1980 that any kind of a technology company would model IBM, and they would, again, three-piece suits and structured meetings, and you wouldn't speak out of turn, and you wouldn't go above your manager's head, and you wouldn't try to do anything on your own. I mean, compare that to Apple or Google or Microsoft, for that matter. They're all technology companies, but the organizational cultures are much different than those.
Oh, they're vastly different, especially Google.
Sure.
Even my company, I have my own company, and even my company, we're structured and we're very stringent on certain things, but in other areas we're not. Like when it comes to safety and how the actual job is done, then we're strictly structured on that. But when it comes to things like going on with the employees or whatever, I have an open door policy, and they know they can come to me at any time. I welcome all of their ideas, even when we're on the job site. If they come up with another idea that they think we ought to try, then we do that one of two ways. We have them voice the idea, but if it's something we've already done, and we know it won't work, if we're in a time crunch, we explain to them why the idea won't work. But if we have a little bit of time, we say, okay, go ahead and try it. So that way they can see for themselves why it won't work. So it depends on our time frame as far as where we can do that. So, it's like I said, my company is a little bit different, when it comes to things like that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. Some of the best leaders I've dealt with and worked with and coached and everything like that, you reminded me of this when you're talking about, well, let's try it and see what happens, because sometimes sometimes you don't know. But some of the best leaders, and I used to really promote this to them, if you have someone who's taking initiative, and taking initiative is one of the what I call the upper 1%. It's hard to necessarily rank the top, second, third, fourth, but it's in that one of the top one things. Taking initiative is what employers are looking for these days, and what that really means is, you don't try and run over anybody. It doesn't mean that you don't follow the rules. It means that you take initiative, like you take ownership, like you take initiative to, rather than say, gosh, I can't believe no one dumped that garbage can last night, or waste paper basket. Rather than saying that even to yourself, you simply go over and pick up the basket and take care of it yourself. It takes 2 minutes. Those kind of things, it's a very simplistic kind of an example, but that's what employees look for. So along those lines, if someone is willing to take a risk, if an employee says, hey, let me try this and see what happens, and it doesn't work, let's say it fails miserably, you have a choice as a leader. You can further degrade that person and talk down to them and make them feel even worse than they already do, or you can and I even suggest giving a little award. Hey, now we know that doesn't work, so you are one step closer to finding what does work. So, thanks for, taking the initiative to try, to think outside the box, to sort of congratulate someone. So that reminds me of what you're talking about.
We don't ever, that is something I'm very particular about. We never, ever talk down to people, ever, because where we work, the work that we do is highly specialized. And in the area that we have to work, there's a lot of people. So we have to be careful, especially when you're being overheard or things like that, because that can reflect on the client that we're actually doing the work for. It can reflect on them. So we have to be really, really careful about how we say things around people. Even when we joke, when we're on the site, just us, we have to be careful, about things like that. And we operate off the Christian principles. We treat people the way that we want to be treated. And, it's like I tell them, you can grow as far as you want to grow, and I'll help you get there.
Mm-hmm.
But, they have to show me that they're willing to put in the work to get to that particular position. And I am very, very blessed and very fortunate. I have some wonderful guys working with me. Really great guys.
I have a lot to say about that, and I am going to say a little bit about it. But remind me, I may have read it, you may have put it in the introduction. Tell me exactly what it is you do.
We assist in the remodifications and the remands of escalators and elevators.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. If I read that, I don't remember, because that is very interesting.
It's a niche.
But, and you clearly, is this your own company, or are you a
It's
manager?
mine.
It's your own company. Well, congratulations.
I started this company 7 years ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
The thing that I want to say about this, and I'm going to say it, I guarantee you, a few times or several times throughout this course, because what you just said seems to me to be such common sense. You would think that this would almost never ever happen, that you would disparage or talk down to an employee, because in essence you're actually talking down to your own company.
Exactly.
And it is a Christian principle, just like you shouldn't talk down to your child. And there's biblical principles on that. So you guide them, you teach them, you discipline them, but you don't promote wrath in your child. That's what the Bible says. So what amazes me, and you had experience with the other company that you work for. What amazes me is that this does happen. People do these things. People do disparage their employees. People do talk bad about their competitors. People do belittle someone. People do reprimand people when they should. Not that people should get away with everything, but when there's a chance to rebuild someone. There's a great story about and I can't think of all the details, but it is someone who owns an airline. I think it's something like that. And a guy ruined a new employee, sort of a middle manager, ruined a piece of equipment. It was close to $1 million or some astronomical sum of money. And the either the CEO or the owner was asked, well, are you going to fire him, or aren't you going to fire him? And he says, no, I just spent $750,000 training him. Why would I get rid of him? He knows the mistake he made. I can't get that back. But there's a lot of other psychological principles to that in terms of establishing loyalty. I mean, imagine if you were that person, if you were that man or woman, whoever it was, and you didn't get fired for that. Not to say that people should not get fired for certain things, but imagine the loyalty and how that person will promote your company and speak positively about it. So the question really, I'm going to put it out there: does it not amaze you that more people don't simply embrace that kind of a culture in their business?
It's very astonishing, to be honest with you, because they're so quick to pass the buck and get a scapegoat. They say, well, somebody's got to answer for this. Heads are going to roll in some sort of way, and they make that happen.
Right.
But we operate off a different principle. Like I said, my guys have broken tools. They have broken keys off at locks. They have forgotten equipment on site. Then we never got it back. And we have discussed that, and I told him, I said, okay, I'm gonna let this one go. I'm gonna eat this one, but the next one's on you. You'll be required to pay for it.
Sure.
And the one thing, we discussed that, and they never forgot it again. So, because they knew they had to be more responsible now. And I'll tell them sometimes, you're not here today. You need to get your head in the game, because this stuff that we do is extremely dangerous. So, and I can't have them with their head not in the game, because it could very well cost the life of one of their teammates. So we have to be very, very careful and very cautious with that. But there are certain areas where there is no negotiation, none, absolutely. I don't care how long they've been with me, if they've been with me the entire time. I don't care if it was my project superintendent. If I caught him without his personal protection equipment on,
Mhm.
without that harness on to keep him from falling, I'm going to have to terminate him. I don't have a choice.
Right.
I mean, so certain things there is no leeway on, but on others, like a piece of equipment, I'd rather lose a piece of equipment than I would somebody's life.
Mhm.
Life means more to me than that.
Sure.
And it's just money. I've got insurance. It's just money.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, yeah, like I said, I definitely appreciate that. And again, like you said, that there, you hear that term oftentimes, heads will roll, and it really does not set up a pleasant work environment to be working in, whether or not you were the person who made the mistake or not. If you're coming to work and that is like, my gosh, if I mess up today, like I might lose my job, or even it's not even, it is that a person could lose their job for a minor mistake, but even more than that is the culture that when you're coming to work, how do you, are you happy to be coming to work? Are you happy to see those people? Or are you, gosh, I can't, I have to dredge in here because I have a mortgage, or I got kids, or I have to provide, or whatever the case may be. But I'm not really happy to be here. That's exactly what this, one of the things that this course is exactly about, is how the work environment, or I like to say organizational environment, impacts the um, mental health and behavior of the employees, associates, as well as the clients, customers, and other stakeholders. And then also, it's one of the easiest definitions for people who like, what's organizational psychology? What does that even mean? That's the first part. The second part is how the employees' attitudes and behaviors and mental health, even how does that impact the culture of the organization? I mean, to use extreme examples, the term going postal has been ingrained in our vernacular for a couple of decades or more now. It wasn't that way when I was a kid growing up in the 60s and 70s. No one heard of that. So the mental health and the attitudes and behaviors of certain employees can impact an organization, so that people are, and I'm an adjunct professor at Central Christian and some other colleges, and I love it. But my sort of mainstay, or the job that pays my benefits, I work for Broward County Schools, and of course, I'm sure you've seen in the news, the tragedy that we had at Douglas High School on Valentine's Day, and so that has definitely impacted my school, and I'm about 12 miles away from there, 12 to 15 miles away, but it's impacted the entire county, the entire district. So because of one of the students, so that's exactly what we're going to, why I said one of the things we're exactly going to talk about here in this course.
Actually, the outreach for that went further than you think. My daughter lives in Tampa, and well, Valrico actually,
Mhm.
and the impact of what happened where you are has reached to where they are, and they are in constant fear, even though they're a couple hours away.
Right.
It's the same thing.
Mhm.
So the outreach has been horrible. I mean, totally horrible about that, and I'm so sorry you had to go through that.
Well, it was a tough day, and and I appreciate that, and it continues to be tough. And I just, I'm sure, I think Florida, I was in education, when Columbine happened, in Colorado in 1999, and that had an impact on us. And we talk about it here, in Paducah, Kentucky, and Detroit, and we're always, we talk a lot of times, like, when Columbine happened, like, it was front page news when the Amish schoolhouse was attacked back in the 90s, the one-room schoolhouse. That was on. They interrupted television for live reports of that, and it got to the point where things, was becoming commonplace. So things are going, not for us, but things are going back to page 3. Like, it didn't stay in the top of the news cycle for very long. So we were certainly affected by those things. But when this one happened, closer to us, like I said, everyone here, and then the colleagues that I know from over there, I only know a couple. I mean, it really has turned them upside down. So it kind of makes sense that, your daughter in Tampa now, because it is relatively close. It's about, 3 or 4, it's in the same state, and it's just, and it's the worst tragedy. More people died there than in Columbine. And, some of the failings of, or so-called, we'll see how it all plays out, but it seems pretty apparent that, and there's no script for this. I'm not here to throw stones at anybody, but, it seems like some protocols weren't followed. And even the fact that we have to take an active killer training here, we do that once a year, either on campus or off campus, teachers go through it. So even that, that's not something I got in education way back in the 90s. But those are the things that, impact the culture. I won't keep on here much longer. I do want to go to the Civil Rights Act and, the other case study, which is interesting. The Sara Lee and the Tevillard Bakery. Love the names, of course. I didn't come up with that case study, by the way. I can't take credit for it. But if you got a chance to read a lot of the discussions, some people are sure that there is no adverse impact. Some people are sure there is. And I'm not sure what side of the fence you were on, Debbie, but
I think adverse impact is a crock. I mean, I understand, don't get me wrong,
Sure.
I understand what they're trying to say, but using the study that we used this week, I mean, all right, you only had 4% or 40% of the blacks were hired. Okay, fine, but only 10 applied, whereas you had 15 whites that applied and 10 of them were hired. But now, I think their system was flawed as far as the job requirements. They could have done something a little different, because just because you're educated doesn't mean you can add up math in your head.
Right.
But I mean, but as far as the adverse thing, no, I think that was just a crock. I think that's part of where our problem is today, and that's my opinion and my belief.
Sure. The case study is really, in a sense, it's good in this regard. It, as an introduction to IO psychology, it sort of sharpens your critical thinking to make you dig a little deeper. Because, as you said, is it really necessary to have 2 years of college to be able to be a cashier? If an attorney for the plaintiff, Sara Lee, that's likely where he would try and build his, or she would try and build her case, depending. Okay. Because that could be seen. I don't necessarily think it is in this, fake case, small bakery. I don't necessarily think that. And again, when you look at the number of hires, would it really go forward? It is very unlikely that this would go forward, because it is very hard to prove that. If you look at all the case studies and all those things, they almost always either side with the company, or the case just doesn't go anywhere because it has no merit. No attorney will pick it up, and someone who's applying for an entry-level position, really can't retain an attorney unless that attorney thinks that he's going to win something and get some damages on the other side, some money on the other side. Yeah. So now you do hear about some cases like the Denny's case from years ago, where there was the customer thing. The customers were made to wait, or whatever have you. There was a couple of, I think Denny's got hit twice, and so those make the news. So sometimes people think that this happens all the time because it was a big payoff, and it was a big deal. But when you look at the number of complaints that are filed, very few go anywhere. And in the case of the Tevillard Bakery, probably wouldn't go anywhere, because I don't think an attorney would really think that he was going to get anywhere with this, because if he did, okay, he could attack the idea of having 2 years of college, but I don't think there's really enough traction there to get anywhere. But one of the points is that as you look at this field of IO psychology, the value of an IO psychologist, and along with an attorney, a business attorney, to look and sort of prevent you from exposing, and exposure is kind of a legal term, more or less, jargon, if you will. But what happens sometimes is a mid-sized company will do something like this. And even though we know it's not going anywhere, even if someone makes a complaint, says some bad things, goes on social media and says some things which, anybody can say anything on social media, left, right, whatever. The idea, one of the ideas at least, is let's avoid this, and let's be aware that this could be a problem. This idea that we have to have 2 years of college. How can we avoid this? Okay, well, let's put our heads together. If you legitimately think that you want your cashiers to be really sharp and be able to, manage money, and make quick math calculations in their brain, well, maybe we can say we suggest 2 years of college, but we'll also provide some kind of a test, so that that would take away that exposure, if you will, and that's what you want to avoid, because anytime someone says that, you're taking off your mission. If you have to defend yourself, and that's why so many cases are settled out of court, because it's just cheaper for a company to throw thousands of dollars at someone and get back to work rather than spend time defending themselves and the publicity and things such as that. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And this is the sad part about it. All too often, and I see this a lot, all too often companies are requiring a 4-year degree or a 5-year degree or something like that. And the position is not one that you would think would require degrees. I mean, they're overreaching, and then they want to give them low pay. And, I'm just not a big advocate when it comes to things like that. I'm more concerned with skills and the people being able to do their job. I don't care if you went to college. I don't care. If you did, that's great. If it benefits us, even better. But, I'm more concerned that you're able to do the job that I'm trying to hire you for. And, it's just, I don't think that company put the 2 years college out there as far as a discrimination thing. I don't think it had anything to do with race or anything along those lines. I think whoever mistakenly did it, I think they honestly believed that only someone with some sort of college education had the common sense to be able to add numbers in their head. Right. My grandfather didn't get past the 5th grade, and he was a painter. But he had to do a lot of mental calculations in his head, as far math calculations in his head, when he was trying to figure out coverage of the square foot coverage of paint and things like this. He would have been able to do that cashier job with no problem, but he had no college. Right. So that's what I'm saying. This was totally flawed, and that's why. And I'm not a big proponent of the adverse effect. I'm just not about that, because I think they look for more ways to, and I'm trying to find a politically correct way of putting this. I think they look for problems where there aren't any. Is a better way to put it. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, you're not the only person, along those lines, and it's certainly in many cases, I think, essentially anyone, common sense would agree. On the other hand, there are situations where companies may try and do that. And if we didn't have laws and statutes in place, probably more companies would do that. Or I shouldn't probably, there's a chance.
They would. They'd do it in a heartbeat.
So again, to me, because, people come with good arguments on both sides. And again, I never say in this discussion, because I've taught this class a few times, yeah, you're right. No, you're right. We don't really know. First of all, the case is not put out there really for a solution. It's to expose students to, oh gosh, these are the things that really go on in IO psychology. But there's a lot of information that we don't have, and things like that. But to me, there's a few objectives to reach here. One of them is, if I'm going to open up a bakery, and I'm going to, my mission is to provide, delicious baked goods to the community and serve the community in that way, because that's, I think, what business is. It's not about profit. It's about serving, your purpose and serving the community in some way. The profits will come, the natural consequence of that. Anything that sort of takes you away from, buying flour and yeast and all those kind of things is something that you want to avoid. So I think it's a good one. It's a little bit of a tough one. And I definitely appreciate what everyone said about it. We've been, for a little while, Debbie. I'm not sure. You sound like you're not feeling well. You mentioned you couldn't stay very long.
I've been sick all week, and my chest is killing me like crazy. And I've been on antibiotics and everything.
Oh boy. Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
It's tough. Even doing online classes when you're not feeling well, I understand. I've been on both sides of it. But at least you are able to work from the comfort of your home with this. So I'm going to just end with the very first, for those who didn't tune in live with Debbie and I'm going to mention our Bible verse. We're just going to go from the beginning, Genesis 1:1. And we're going to use that for our Bible text. If you listen to the recording of this on YouTube, I'll post the link in the announcements, Debbie, is if you want to revisit this, others will see it in the announcements. Otherwise, they won't be hearing this right now. And you'll be able to click on that. It'll be a YouTube recording, and then you'll listen to this and tell me that Genesis 1:1 is our Bible text. Debbie, anything else on the questions or anything like that? I want to make sure that I take care of you today. Anything?
I've just got one question.
Sure.
Now, and it's going back to that assignment that we did with the Tubalard Bakery. Now, if they do the math, they do have a case for adverse impact. Now, my question to you, and that was just on the, now this is kind of, you'll see in a second. All right, their requirement was the 2 years of college. How would it have been if they had specified where they couldn't, the cashiers couldn't be tattooed or have any facial piercings or things like that? Would that fall in the same guidelines as the 2 years of, well, I say 2 years of college. I mean, because those are things they're stipulating that cannot be. Would that be like a discrimination type thing, or how would something like that work?
That is a fantastic question. There was a time, to apply or to get hired to be a firefighter or a police officer, you couldn't have any tattoos. It just was not acceptable. So, today it's, anybody under 30 seems to have tattoos, right? So, employers have had to change to some extent, otherwise they would have nobody to hire. So typically what they're doing is any tattoos must be covered. So if you have, like the people have tattoos on their arms, okay, then you're gonna have to wear long sleeves to cover those while you're at work. Piercings, the ornaments or earrings or whatever it is, pins or whatever it is. I can't tell you you can't have a piercing, but I can tell you that you can't wear excessive jewelry at this job. And that's a lot looser than it was from a societal level, 2 decades ago, as well as if someone were to try and use that, for hiring. Because one of the things the law does is we look at the norms of society. That was a big thing I think back in the 70s and 80s, like what was pornography and what was art. One of the things they said was, well, how do you tell? I say it's art. Someone can come along and say pornography is art, okay, which it's not. But the court said we have to base this on the norms of society. So in your community, this is art. And maybe a urban area. This is not art because this is we're in the Bible Belt now, so we're not going to have. So that would be part of what the courts base their decisions on. I think we're leaning that way now with some of these other things because the norms of society have changed. Certainly, when I'm 57, so I was born 1960. So the only people when I was growing up that had tattoos were people who'd been in the Navy. They had like a little Navy thing on their forearm, which could not a big deal. You can easily cover that, or it really wasn't a big deal. Or bikers or people who've been to prison. That's it. So there are job descriptions and things like that say tattoos must be covered. Piercings, you can't wear excessive jewelry while at work. But even that's getting looser. I remember when police officers, a lot of times, I'm in South Florida, right? A lot of times you'd see them wearing long sleeves in the middle of July, and that's because they had tattoos, covering their arm. Now I see, police officers show up with, what they call the tattoo sleeve all the time. Does that answer your question?
It does. I mean, because there's a lot of, and I'm not trying to be ugly, but when I go into a place, I don't care if it's Starbucks or Krispy Kreme or whatever, or Goodwill, I don't care, whatever. I don't really want to see somebody with that They have I don't know if you call it a plug or what do you call it in their lower lip, and you can see their bottom teeth. Yeah, that's not really something I want to see.
Right.
So, I mean, that was just my question on that. Would people be able to fight not being hired because of things like that?
And again, it's a good question, and that's why IO psychology to me is very fascinating. Society's changed. There was a time, I'm not sure where they ended up with it. UPS drivers, the brown truck guys, they were told they had to, the men. Of course, there's men back in those days mostly. They had to be clean shaven. No beards whatsoever. I think they could have like a mustache to a certain extent. But then there was a discrimination filed because certain religious uh, uh, beliefs, Judaism and Islam, that's against their religious beliefs. So, where do we go with that? I don't see a lot of UPS drivers with beards. So they may have been able to win that and maybe said, okay, you can work for UPS, but you can't be a driver. The UPS has, pretty deep pockets themselves. So, if that was the case against, you know, Joe's five and dime, he may not have done as well. But it flows. It's kind of a living thing, and I mean, look, I'm open-minded, and I'm relatively liberal in a lot of ways, Debbie. But I definitely what you're saying, it resonates with me. Like one of the things I really don't understand is something they call them a gauge. I don't know what they call it.
Yeah, that's it. It's a gauge.
It's on the earlobe, and it just makes it get bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't get it.
I don't either. Now, see, with the stuff that we do, I don't care if the boys are tattooed. I don't care. I don't care if they've got the hair cut funky. I don't care if it's pink or purple. I don't care. But they can't have facial hair because they have to wear respirators.
Right.
And that's a safety feature. So that's the only thing. Now, I don't care if they grow a beard in between jobs. I don't care. But when it comes time to wear that respirator, they have to shave it off.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just, certain things I can understand, but I wouldn't be real fond of that gauge or seeing their teeth or whatever. Fortunately, my guys are pretty level-headed. A couple of them are kind of tatted up. I really don't care about that. As long as they do the job and they're loyal to me, I'm loyal to them.
Yeah, one of the things I do notice at the Starbucks is the guys with a beard, they have to wear a kind of like cooks have to wear like a hairnet.
Right.
Or like a net on their beard, which to me, I would shave my beard before I wore that thing if I had a beard.
Yeah, I look retarded enough. I don't need any assistance.
All right. Anything else, Debbie?
No, sir. That's
All
it.
right. Well, let me just have a quick word of prayer, and we'll get out of here and enjoy the rest of our Sunday, okay?
Thank you.
Father in heaven, thank you so much for Debbie and this conversation we had. I'm so happy to meet her in this way. I'm praising you for this technology. Let us use it as an instrument of your love and kindness and mercy and a means to connect with each other. I pray for her as she's not feeling well. I pray for her family as well, as I pray for all of my students in this class and their families as well, that they support them and understand the sacrifices that are being made. I pray for her business as well, that it may be a blessing and serve those that she seeks to serve, that you will bless it in a very special way as well as our employees. Father, as we move forward, let us keep mindful that we are doing this, each of us, myself as well as my students, we are doing this to honor you and to serve you and to fulfill your purpose in our life. All these things we pray in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Dr. Nicholas, and I will see you next Sunday.
You betcha. All right, Debbie. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.